Long haul truckers, what's the creepiest most paranormal thing you've seen on the road at night? Maybe a bit off the mark, but it still scared the crap out of me. I was headed west on I-76 here in Denver, just cruising along at about 70 miles per hour. Out of nowhere, I saw a massive, almost solid cloud of what looked to be dirt coming at me. I'd say it was at least 20 feet wide and 10 feet tall. I scanned ahead of me, but couldn't see any vehicle it could have came from. With nowhere to go, I slowed down and took the hit, hoping there wasn't anything big enough in there to come through the windshield or jack up my truck. Owner operator. It was pretty loud as I smashed through it. The instant it hit, I knew it wasn't dirt though. I immediately hit the washers because I couldn't see a damn thing through all of the carnage. My windshield was painted with guts. Turns out it was bees, freaking huge bees, that sounded like rocks when they hit. I can't even imagine seeing that swarm if I was walking. They would kill the crap out of anything in their path. I was driving near Las Vegas at around 3 AM. I had been following a few black SUVs along the highway for a good hour or so. They had Nevada plates that were single digit numbers in order 1, 2, 3. Suddenly they all pulled off the highway down a dirt path. There was no mile marker or cactus that would indicate a path there. It was just dirt. After pulling off the road, they all turned their lights off. I didn't stick around. It was creepy. Westbound I-90 between Vantage and Ellensburg, WA. Young woman in a summer dress and heels walking alone on the shoulder towards Ellensburg. No vehicles for miles, so I knew she didn't break down. If you are familiar with this stretch of 90, you know there aren't any houses either. It's desolate. I pull over and ask if she needs a ride. She gets in, says thank you, and I immediately see that she's been crying. I silently take her to the nearest gas station and let her out. She thanks me and tells me her boyfriend had gotten mad at her shortly before I had stopped and kicked her out. Dude, if you're reading this, I hope you rot in hell. Wheel. I'm not a trucker, but a motorcyclist, which kinda makes it even more spooky. Drove home from my GFS house. Just a 20 minutes ride, but it was 3 AM and the road goes through a forest without any street lights. So I ride through the forest, already giving everything my little 50cc dirt bike had in it back then, and suddenly on the side of the road, a ducking naked mannequin is standing. I saw it appear in my headlights and drove by it only doing like 60 km/h. It was scary as hell. A ducking mannequin standing there naked on the side of a dark road in a forest at 3 AM in the morning. Damn, I still get the shivers. I picked up a hitchhiker in my small Nissan Versa sedan, and we were driving down the freeway. There was a big vehicle in front of me, so I couldn't see what was in front of that, when all of a sudden the other guy started yelling tire, tire, and pointing ahead of us. I slammed on my brakes just in time to see the SUV in front of us swerve to late as the car in front of it swerved, as this massive tire that was rolling down the freeway demolished the front end of the vehicle in front of me and bounded high into the air, coming down in front of my car, where the steel band broke and it stopped rolling. If I hadn't slammed on the brakes, it probably would have come down on top of me. He got out at the next gas station. I don't remember his name, but I think he saved my life that day. My dad is a truck driver, and about 13 to 15 years ago, while resting at the side of the road, he woke up in the morning seeing that his entire trailer was robbed empty. My dad's a heavy sleeper, but his cargo could not have been stolen without at least a forklift, and everyone would have woken up by a forklift unloading a trailer. My dad suspects the robbers used a pump to get some kind of chloroform into his cabin to make sure he couldn't wake up. My great uncle was a long-haul trucker, and he swears that one time he was driving down the road to see two guys pull a rolled up carpet out of the trunk of their car and throw it in the river. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but it's still creepy nonetheless. I'm a log truck driver in the Pacific Northwest. We go up into the woods on logging roads and haul logs back from the loggers to sawmills. We start work very early in the morning, 2 to 5 AM, so it's nighttime obviously. One of my co-workers pulled away from the job and started down the logging road. After a couple miles, after the load had settled a bit, he decided to pull over and throw his remaining wrappers around the load. As he is tying his load down, he looked back and saw a mountain lion watching him from 10 feet off of the end of his trailer. He slowly backed up to his driver door and got in. By the time he looked in his mirror, the lion had disappeared. Not paranormal, but it's damn sure creepy. We see lions and bears fairly often out there, but to be that close and out of the truck. We face different obstacles up in the woods than highway drivers. My dad has several stories from hauling logs in Idaho and driving trucks through Utah and Nevada. My favorite is from actually just in his pickup going through Utah. He said there was a light keeping pace with him out in the desert on a moonless night. It kept pace for a minute before it disappeared, and his truck turned off. He stopped and turned it on, and pulled off at the next diner. The folks in the diner called it a common occurrence. The creepiest is when he was hauling logs in Idaho and was coming down from near Coeur d'Alene area during a snowy winter night. He was putting on chains before heading down steep grade and said all of the hair stood up on his body. It felt like there was something watching him. Halfway down the switchbacks he saw a large figure standing on a 20-foot tall embankment. As he got closer it jumped down, and the shoulders were as tall as the cab. In a single bound it leaped down, and then leaped over to the other side of the embankment. At the time he thought it was a Sasquatch. Now he says it was probably a demon trying to make him crash. He didn't stop to remove the chains until he was well away from the mountain. I'm a stand-up comic. I often refer to my profession as being a trucker with jokes. Near the north end of mainland Michigan, I saw a car stopped on the side of the highway. We hadn't seen a car for a while. It was 2 a.m. I commented to my buddy, "Poor bastard." But as we passed the car, the lights came on, and it got back on the road. Odd timing. And then, it was gaining on us. I told my friend to speed. He did. He sped more, and the car kept closing in. We were doing 120 and this guy was catching up to us. We saw an exit with a hotel, so we took it and drove right in front of the building, where it was well lit and we could see the front desk clerk. The car got off that exit too. It drove into the hotel parking lot, then turned around and got back on the highway. I'll never know what that guy wanted from us. I'm fine with that remaining a mystery. I drove by a marsh every night when I was going home from work. One night I saw a car pulled over with hazards on. Dude was head to toe covered in blood. No crash, no injury, just covered in blood. My grandfather was in the Air Force, and one night he was driving back to his base maybe, I can't quite remember, and he saw a woman standing on the side of the road in a long white dress at about 2 a.m. He circled back to ask if she needed help, and she was nowhere. To be SE he searched for her for about an hour before giving up and deciding to leave it alone. When he decided to go on his way he had a strong feeling that he needed to switch lanes. He was on the road alone in the middle of the night, so he had no idea why, and just ahead on the road there was a broken down truck with no hazards on that he would have hit and probably been killed by if he stayed in the lane he had been in. To this day he's convinced the woman was trying to warn him, like an omen or something. In the early 1990s, I was driving from a small town in Ontario, Canada to Florida. I just got past the border at around 3 a.m. and found out one of the roads I needed to turn on was closed. There was no one around, so I looked at my map and decided to turn around and take a different road. As I made the turn, I immediately knew that I shouldn't go this way. It was a tiny, one-way street and there was trash scattered all over. It looked like a huge group of people were just there, but there was no one. No street lights, no other cars or houses or any reason for anyone to be out there. I was so creeped out that I turned around and went the correct way. This story isn't paranormal, but it is unusual. There was also a time where it was late at night, again, and I was near Renfrew, Ontario, driving on an old bumpy twisty road. There was no one around. I looked to my left, and I saw a face. It looked like a horse. I immediately stopped my car, and noticed that there was a horse following me. After a few minutes another car pulled up, and they were looking for the horse. This one ended well with the farmer taking the horse back. It really freaked me out though. Not exactly at a road, but in the sky. I'm a pilot, and usually fly around Florida. This specific night I was out at around 11:30 p.m. with a friend, flying down the Eastern Shoreline, when I suddenly see a medium-sized white light slowly start coming towards us, stop, and then go vertically into the ocean and disappear. Both my friend and I saw it, and we were completely speechless. Asked the air traffic control if there were any kind of aircraft around us, and he told us we were the only aircraft in a 40-mile radius. Saw a clown staggering down an alley in the city, back facing us, while we were coming to a stoplight at like 1 AM. Looked like he was still blowing balloons, or masturbating. Not seeing his face made it more ominous. I'm not sure if it's either really creepy or sad. Maybe he was on his way to abduct children, or maybe he was blind drunk after a long day. I'm a truck driver in the UK. Was driving through rural Scotland one night going down a country lane. All of a sudden I start to see flashing lights come through the trees. Lights of all colors flashing through the trees and causing some really freaky looking shadows on the road. I'm not a believer of aliens or anything, but my first thought was UFOs. Safe to say I put my foot down and got out of there. Found out the next day it was rave happening in a field, but at the time it didn't half scare me. I was coming back home from a trip from Michigan and I saw these people wearing cult-like robes. One in town, one on a highway, and one in a park, all staring at me. Myself and 2 friends had to drive from Laredo, Texas to Baton Rouge, Louisiana one night in my Ford van. It was about 2 AM. There is a particularly long and dark section of highway just outside Laredo. No buildings, towns, or lights for about 50 miles. I was in the right lane coming up on a truck and pulled out into the left passing lane. As I was slowly overtaking this long truck, my peripheral vision caught a sudden movement of this big truck towards the right shoulder. I saw the truck was swerving to avoid hitting a person dressed in all white face, whose arms were folded across the chest and eyes were closed as they walked across the highway. I swerved to the left and barely missed this ghostly looking person with my passenger mirror. Can still remember seeing that the eyes were closed. That's how close we came to hitting this person. I'm not a trucker, but my cousin was for a short stint. A lion ran out in front of him when he had gotten out to pee. He called his mom and she asked if he was high. He denied it and said a ducking lion ran out in front of me, I'm telling you. A few days later, the news revealed animals had escaped from a local zoo he was near, including a lion. We love to tell that story to everyone. Not a long haul trucker, but thought this would fit here. Also on mobile, so sorry for format. My mom, sister and I were on our way to a baseball game of mine during my junior year of high school. This was in northern New York, so spring got a little chilly at times. The main road we took stretched about 35 miles and was nothing but cornfields and tree lines. We hit a stretch of the road that was super foggy for no reason, so my mom slowed down to a proper speed. We finally reached the end of the fog and we all looked to the left to see where we were. About 50 yards from the road was a man and woman in what appeared to be wedding clothing from at least 100 years ago. Man wearing a big top hat and the woman wearing a very old looking white dress, holding hands with their backs to us, walking towards the woodline. We drove past, and I just remember the silence in the car until my mom said, "What the duck was that?" Till this day, whenever we are together and one of us tells the story, we all get goosebumps. Not a trucker, but I was driving through Nevada on a long ride trip. About 3 AM, sun barely starting to peek out. My sister was asleep in the passenger seat and my parents asleep in the back seat, so it was just me on a straight stretch of highway in the middle of the desert. I was exhausted and extremely bored from the lack of scenery when suddenly, directly in front of me, up in the pale sky, there was a flash of green and a green meteor carved towards the horizon, before flashing green again and disappeared. At first I thought it was a UFO or something, but I later read meteors can burn green if they have copper in them. Now I think fondly back on that meteor. My family was asleep for it, no one around for miles. I like to think that it was just for me. I saw a baboon in San Saba, Texas crouched down next to the road. He lifted something to his mouth and I saw nothing but fangs. So out of place that it gave me goosebumps. One of the locals explained that a lot of fake ranchers will keep exotic animals, and when they grow aggressive or go in heat they will cut them loose. When I was doing the long haul thing, I was driving through Oklahoma, don't remember exactly where, but it was late at night, and I was already tired. While I was driving along, and saw what I thought was a Grim Reaper. Looked in my mirrors and didn't see it. At that point I decided that, regardless of how many hours I have left on my log, I'm stopping the next chance I get to rest. Later that night after getting parked, I turned on my CB and heard someone talking about a bad accident just a few miles beyond where I had stopped. After asking how long ago it happened, it turned out that, if I had kept going, I would have been caught up in it. Edit, I do recall that I was heading north from Dallas GX. Looking at my old book that I kept of tracks I took, I think it was US 75N, since Plano was on the list of cities I would go through on that run. Where exactly I couldn't tell you,